Very impressive. So we're back, we're here. Last week we had an overcrowded room for my friend Danny Schiff. This week, not so much, but it's okay. We have Torah to study. And there are 2.4 bagels for every human in the room. So what could be bad? What could be bad? You all get food to eat. And we have great Torah. We have a lot of Torah to study. It's Vayakil. And this week is normally connected to next week's portion. And so you'll see that the koshis are definitely connected, and if you're here this week, you'll understand next week even more. And if you're not, too bad. Anyway, we have a portion I know and love. Share with me in the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu ba'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. So this week's Torah is sort of the culmination of the tabernacle construction project. Remembering the word for tabernacle is Mishkan, the place where God dwells. We'll get there in a little bit. But this is the final convocation that started back in Parshat Teruma in Exodus 25, where God says, take a teruma, a free will offering from all those who would bring gifts to the sanctuary. And then that's the command. Then we get all kinds of stuff. We get all the details. We get in Tetzaveh, all the clothes for the Kohanim and who's supposed to make them. We then get in Ki Tisa, a half shekel census, a reminder about Shabbat, and then the golden calf interlude with the second set of tablets. And finally, we make it to Vayakil. And Vayakil is a portion that's very dear to me, as I say every single year, because it was my senior sermon at HUC with Professor Norman Cohen. And so I studied it for months. Senior sermons, as our rabbinic intern just gave hers a few weeks ago, a shira. You pour yourself into it so you don't mess up in front of the faculty and your fellow students. But I gave a sermon on this portion that is very telling. I'll tell you about that at some point, maybe towards the end, of why it was so interesting and so, in a way, unique. But I learned about this portion that the translation is wrong. So we'll read the translation, and then I'll tell you why it's wrong, right? Harley will appreciate it especially. I'm glad Harley came today because you'll see that there's something more than meets the eye. The key koshi.
I love it when the translations are wrong.
Oh, who doesn't? Who doesn't? Come on. How does creating the Mishkan enable all Israel to answer God's call, in keeping with our sort of theme this year? And how are we still building the Mishkan today? What does that mean? So we're going to start right here. We're going to go, Lisa, go right around. And there's a lot of text to read, but you should get the feel of the chapter. So please.
Moses then controlled the whole Israelite community and said to them, these are things that the Lord has commanded you to do. On 6 days, work will be done. But on the seventh day, you shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire throughout your settlements on the Sabbath day.
And though that's not the focus, that's important as a note into convoking or creating community. Jeff, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Creating community. If you don't follow the Sabbath, you're put to death.
Yeah, that's exactly my thought.
Yeah, but by the way, we're gonna read the text and then you're gonna have lots of questions. Right, but thank you for, yeah, by the way, that is one way you create a community. Correct.
And the carrot and the stick.
No, that was,
Yes.
Watch soccer.
no, that was creating a very small community.
A very small community, depending on how well you do Shabbat. Okay, Jeff, keep going. Moses said further, please.
Moses said further to the whole community of Israelites, that is what the Lord has commanded. Take from among you gifts to the Lord, everyone whose heart so moves him shall bring them gifts for the Lord, gold, silver, and copper.
And it goes on. And then it skips to verse 10, please.
Steve?
And let all among you who are skilled come and make all that the Lord has commanded. The tabernacle, its tent, and its elements, its clasps, and its planks, its bars, its posts, and its sockets. The ark and its poles, the cover and the curtain of the screen. Table, its poles, and all the utensils. And the bread of display, the lampstand for lighting, its furnishings and its lamps, and the oil for lighting. The altar of incense and its poles, the anointing oil and the aromatic incense. And the entrance screen to the entrance of the tabernacle. The altar of burnt offering is copper grating, its poles and its furnishings, the laver and its stand. The hangings of the enclosure, its posts and its sockets. And the screen for the gate of the court. Pegs for the tabernacle, the pegs for the enclosure, and the cords. The service vestments for officiating in the sanctuary, the sacral vestments of Aaron, the priest, and the vestments of his son for priestly service.
Right, so it's a lot of stuff. Lot of stuff, and it's appropriate that Steve read this in the building process, right? So, yeah, and then we get, the detail here. Go ahead, Harlan.
So the whole community of Israelites left Moses' presence. And everyone who excelled in ability and everyone whose spirit moved him came, bringing to the Lord his offering for the work of the tent of meeting and for its service for the sacral vestments. Men and women, all whose hearts moved them, all who make an elevation offering of gold to the Lord, came bringing brooches and earrings and rings and pendants and gold objects of all kinds. And everyone who had in his possession blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen, goat's hairs, tanned ram skins, and dolphin skins, brought them.
Yeah, so
Everyone-
don't ask.
You're right.
Where did they get the dolphin skin? That is not, we don't know. It's not, we don't know. Again, don't even go there. But anyway, go ahead.
Everyone who would make gifts of silver and copper brought them as gifts for the Lord. Everyone who had in his possession acacia wood, for any wood of the service brought that. And all the skilled women spun with their own hands and brought what they had spun in blue and purple and crimson yarns and in fine linen even. And all the women who excelled in that skill spun the goat's hairs. The chieftains brought lapis lazuli and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastplate, spices and oil for lighting, for anointing the oil and for the aromatic incense. Thus the Israelites, all the men and women whose hearts moved them to bring anything for the work that the Lord through Moses had commanded to be done, brought it as a free will offering to the Lord.
Right, so again, important note. I then cut out the thing that just tells us who runs the show, which is Bezalel and Aholiab, because we got that twice before. But just to note, this is Bezalel and Aholiab who are in charge, and then chapter 36 11.
Quick question, Grandpa.
Yeah, wait, hold on.
At the end of 13.
Yeah,
Lechem hapanim, the bread of display. Is that a play on
it's space bread.
face bread?
In the Old Testament of the Revised Standard Version, they would call it showbread, SHEW bread. Yeah, Elaine.
Moses then called Bezalel and Aholiab, and every skilled person whom the Lord had endowed with skill, everyone who excelled in ability, undertake the task and carry it out. They took over from Moses all the gifts that the Israelites had brought to carry out the tasks connected with the service of the sanctuary. But when these continued to bring free will offerings morning after morning, the artisans who came were engaged in the tasks of the sanctuary came, each from the task upon which he was engaged, and said to Moses, "The people are bringing more than is needed for the tasks entailed in the work that the Lord has commanded to be done." Moses thereupon had this proclamation made throughout the camp: "Let no man or woman make further effort for gifts for the sanctuary." So the people stopped bringing. Their efforts have been more than enough for all the tasks to be done.
All right, so you got a lot of text, but it's really the full story of you're getting the feel, right? So shot questions that somehow jump off the page about, so what is this creating the Mishkan Like, why is it so crucial? And what is it that they're building? And what are the challenges in the building? Mike?
So my question is, what about the people whose hearts do not move them? What happened to them? I hope that Gary's wrong about the death part.
Right, well, Gary's not wrong, because it's in the text, but,
No, but I mean, for those people whose hearts did move them, what happened to them?
right, so that's an excellent question, which will be very apparent, and the question is, so who are those whose hearts don't move them? How do we understand that, Jim?
I love the fact that this is a true community effort, because, even I think the people whose hearts didn't move them to, give things, they didn't give actual things, they perhaps gave of their skill.
Okay,
So, I think that this was something that, that was done, that united the community and brought everybody.
so it's a community effort in a lot of ways, not only by what you bring, or depending on what you bring, but maybe everybody brought something, right? Lisa, then Elizabeth, hold on 1 second, Elizabeth.
So I like that they're using for skill, the chokmah love, like, wise of heart.
Yeah.
And then the hearts are moving.
Yeah, so there's a lot of heart in here. There's a lot of heart in here. People who have a skill are chachmat lev, which is that's the seat of wisdom, by the way, in all of biblical literature. And it tells us again, it tells us like in verse 21, Vayavihu kol ish asher nisa'o libo. Everybody whose heart so moved or lifted them. So this is about, heart uplifting heart, or hearts that were uplifted. Elizabeth, go ahead. Just unmute, Elizabeth. You may be still muted.
Unmute.
We're here.
Yeah, we can hear you.
No, unmute the other. You got just do one more time. There you go.
Okay,
We hear you now.
got Okay, there's all this emphasis on those whose hearts so move them and so forth. And yet there's also at the same time the threat of death if you don't do it right. So how do you reconcile that? Either your heart isn't exactly moving you if you're afraid of being killed from this.
Yeah, maybe or maybe not. But Gary's question echoes, right? And we're gonna get to it in a minute. Clarence.
The Sabbath, it's very interesting that he mentions the Sabbath first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the question is why? I have a hypothesis.
Go ahead.
The focus is supposed to be 24/7, actually once a week, at least when we relate to this, on God.
Yeah.
And being grateful to God.
Yeah.
And worshiping God and
Yeah.
loving God.
I love that. And what are they creating, by the way? They're creating a place for God to dwell, right?
Okay. First things first is focus on God and then service.
Okay.
Related to focus being love of God, and then that imbues your heart.
Okay, all right, I love that. They may be very connected. Steve and Lloyd.
So to me, the antithesis to this is the golden calf, where it's just totally, this is specific to the point, how they want it done, how the people are called together.
Yeah.
The way they all have to work together. They bring in the master guys, Bazile and company, this stamp of people on the plans. Whereas the golden calf just sounded like a total,
A free for all.
a free for all.
Yeah. Okay, so this is somehow a response to the golden calf. Lloyd.
Two little pieces. One, so far as the recitation of the Sabbath, there's a traditional argument that gets made that is the crafts and work that went into the construction of the tabernacle defines the prohibited works on the Sabbath.
39 of them.
Right, so you have that juxtaposition.
Yep.
Two, with regard to the women, you go back to chapter 30, and there's the count on the half shekel. And the only people who get to bring the half shekel are men.
Yeah.
Age 20 or over, in other words, folks who are deemed to be of military age. It's restricted, and there's also the proviso that you cannot add to that half shekel.
Yep.
You cannot detract from it.
Yep.
It's the obligatory tax.
Yep.
On all men over the age of 20.
Download the Ultimate ESPN app to experience all of the features of your speaker.
Yeah, you definitely want to mute. Everybody wants to mute. I can mute you all. You know what? I'll do that because I have the power. So, let me do that. Let me do the whole thing. All right, right? Half shekel, can't go more, can't go
And
less.
over here, it's volunteer fast. People are just donating.
Yep,
The last piece. Think of the construction over here. It's essentially everyone is drafted, everyone volunteers. Everybody is drafted.
Yep.
Everyone gets into it, they bring what they have. And then contrast that, the construction of the first temple. There's a transition. In the context of the first temple, it's no longer everyone gets to participate. What happens? Solomon goes ahead and approaches Hiram of Tyre, and they impress labor, and they import everything.
imports.
And it's essentially slave labor and skilled labor from the outside that do the building.
So to juxtapose that, making the Mishkan is unique because.
Because it is of the people, by the people.
Bingo, right? A lot of reasons, right? I'm gonna go Philip, then I'm gonna go back to fear of death, which some people were just mentioning as an aside. Go ahead, Philip.
Right, you can hear me, Rabbi?
Yep.
So well.
So well, okay, thank you. Something that strikes me about this, which I think is different than what we've heard so far, is that all this time is put onto the directions on how to build a tabernacle, all this detail, loads of detail, so much so that I found that when I've been reading through this with a group week by week, I can't even tell what Torah portion I'm in anymore because it all runs together, right? Detail.
Yeah.
And why that is striking to me is because we then have something like 39 years of wandering in the desert, which isn't described at all, not at all. But with this, we have chapters and chapters of detail. So this suggests to me that for the codifiers of the Torah, this was of such essential importance. So that's all I have on it.
The question is why? The question could have been, why is creating the Mishkan so important for Israel in answering God's call? Could have been that as well. So same Koshi, last comment that I'm gonna comment.
It's funny that when he's talking about everyone bringing more than enough, I'm having this strange juxtapositions of thinking of things like, you know, now I'm blocking on the word, the dew that falls down from heaven.
The manna.
The manna that.
You have enough for everybody.
And then the quail that God sends because they don't have enough, and he sends too much.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know how it's, I don't think it's.
Yeah, I don't think it's directly connected,
But it's
but
just in my mind.
But you're at a question, which is it actually says in the Hebrew, this is my senior sermon, so I know that they brought enough and more. So how can you have enough and more? What is enough? And what are they trying to bring in building the Mishkan? Right? We're gonna get to death in a minute. Hold on a second. Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, to me, it's kind of interesting that it's not, according to the text, the Lord who says, hey, you know, stop, it's enough. It's the artisans who say, come on, you know, let's look around. This is sort of, and these are my words, sort of beginning to defeat its purpose.
Yep.
And so there's almost a rational element to, hey, look, you know, it's great to bring gifts to the Lord or in honor of the Lord, and we're building this temple, but you know, it shouldn't become an end in itself.
Yeah, and Moses, right, so Moses is the one who issues a proclamation based upon the chief artisans, right? Saying, hey, listen, we got enough. They don't have to do this anymore. We got it taken care of, right? So what's going on, right? So how do you translate the word vayakel? Oh, I'm so glad I have this. Steve, I'm gonna just draw behind you. Can the people online see me now if I talk loudly? Yeah, don't all talk at once, it's fine.
We can see you, yes.
Excellent, here's vayakel, and we doubled this, right? So I'm not gonna write on the thing, okay. So here's vayakel, this is the word vayakel. So, the root of the word vayakel is kahal, so here's the word kahal, right? Which means a crowd, or just a random gathering. That's kahal. But the word, if you add 2 letters, you get the word for a sacred community. Ke, hi, la. I've done this 18 million times. A yud and a hey. So you get from a crowd to a sacred community by adding the short form of that. So what are we doing? We're creating a sacred community. How do you create a sacred community? You create a sacred community by saying, we have laws, commandments that remind us every day why we're here. What's the most important central commandment of Torah that keeps us together as a community? You could say kashrut, I would disagree with you. It's Shabbat. If you keep Shabbat, you'll remember everything. Why? Because you remember every day of the week leads to the seventh day, the God day. Because you may forget on Wednesday, you know, a little bit, but on Shabbat, all of a sudden we're getting together, making a chicken, whatever we're doing, right? They may not have made a chicken back here, but we're having a one. So that's A, right? And B, how do you create community? By sharing in something, in building something together. So it's very basic, but very real. So I'm not worried about, Elizabeth, so much the fear of death. And as we know, did it really happen? Well, maybe. The wood chopper who gathers on Shabbat, bad move, stone him to death. But right after that, the next verse says, anybody who kills another human being himself shall be put to death. So the rabbis say, it was a veiled threat. It didn't really happen. Hard to know. But I would say, don't focus on the death, right? Focus on, what are we building with all this stuff? Right, Gary?
So I'd like to focus on the death.
You know,
Some people don't listen.
how is it that people don't listen? Go ahead. I'll give you one focus on death and then.
First sentence of that paragraph, these are the things that the Lord has commanded you to do.
Yeah.
So the Lord has commanded us to do it.
Yeah.
But we can ignore it.
Well, no, we're not ignoring the thing. We're saying, so what would be the takeaway from just a Torah point of view or the rabbinic point of view, which was 2,000 years ago, the rabbis who framed this commentary and the reason we're still here, is Shabbat is so important, it can cause, its non-observance can cause death. Is that spiritual death? Is that, you know, as Hillel said, al tifros min hatzibor, do not separate yourself from the community? Is it when you in fact say, I don't need this? Are you spiritually dead? Are you missing out on something? So I would say it's much bigger than, right, you're gonna get taken out and boom, right, you know, Shirley Jackson stored the lottery. I don't think it's that, right? So, else.
I was gonna say that, I know every time I read this, I'm always struck by the granularity of the description.
Yes.
I think that the granularity of any action is a binding effect for the people who are participants. It's like how you teach. I know we talk a lot about teaching critical thinking. One of the ways that you teach critical thinking isn't to teach it so much as to show people how to navigate a bunch of things and to tell the difference between each one of those things.
Yeah.
And critical thinking is developed on the other side of those exercises.
Beautiful. Yep. So this is about critical thinking and it's putting it in the people's hands. As Lloyd said, this is for the people, by the people. All right, so now go to the remnants with me and you're gonna see a lot of the things you said are gonna be affirmed. And we're gonna sort of build the case for, so what does it mean to make the Mishkan then and now? So first we have the first two comments, which are, where are we? I have no idea, with the white suits, go ahead. The Ramban.
After having told Aaron and the chieftains all God commanded, Moses convened the community, telling them that everything he had commanded about the mission before breaking the covenant. So God was now reconciled with them.
Reconcile with them about what? Read the next comment.
Having come down with the second set of tablets, he now told them about the construction of the tabernacle. The whole community was responsible for paying a ransom to the service of the tabernacle.
Right, so this is alluding to Ki Tisa, the census, but what it's really alluding to, as Steve said, is this is a new building project post-CAF. Right, this is, listen, we broke off our goal. I mean, I can quote my senior sermon. Judah ben Pazi said, must we not shudder, right? Knowing how everyone broke off their gold, right? And only those whose hearts so moved them brought to this effort. So Judah ben Pazi in the Talmud was saying, maybe everybody wasn't inspired. You're telling me that the calf was more inspirational than this in that frenzy? Oi. But somehow the rabbis are saying, this makes up for what we did. So what is Moses doing by the title word of the portion? By Yachel? I gave you the depiction, but the Sfas Emes says the same thing. Jane, give us the Sfas Emes.
Vayahel, he caused a Kehila. There is a hint here that somehow, through the experience of Shabbat, the children of Israel were fused into one congregation.
Right? So what are they saying? When you experience Shabbos, right? And this is the Sfas Emes, the Gera Rebbe, Rabbi Abraham of Ger. So this is what makes a community. When you have Shabbat together, that's the highest moment of community. And the Lubavitcher just underscores, and he's doing even something bigger than Shabbat. Jane, read that as well.
A group that gathers together can likewise break apart, but a Kehila, a group gathered for a sacred purpose, shares a unity that is somehow eternal. The Kehila can never die.
The Kehila can never die. So what is the Lubavitcher Rebbe saying? The Lubavitcher Rebbe is saying, if you are gathering, for it all depends, I guess what he's saying is, it all depends why you're gathering. Right? If you are gathering in order to create something together that you could never do alone. If you're gathering in order to be there for each other, right? In bonds of human support and care. If you just keep going, right? You just keep adding on, right? That's a Kehillah. That has Yud Hey in it, right? So could you be gathering for your bowling tournament and still be a Kehillah? Sure, why not? Right? If you're gathering as a gang to play another attack on another gang, I'm not so sure. So, but I think that there are a lot of gatherings that don't have to be, right? Right? I gather, I just talked to last night, somebody, I don't know who I talked to. Who did I talk to about post-confirmation? I don't remember. Oh no, it was about confirmation, right? And it was about your daughter. It was about your daughter. No, you, no, it was that, we just had Boober this past, Tuesday night. And it was a conversation between two of the girls, the young women, who were saying that like being in that group is such an important part of their week. Boy, that's a Kehillah. So, I mean, so that, to me, could I ask for more? No. Go a little more, just to get, and we're making the case now. What are we making in making this Mishkan? Take from among you gifts to Adonai, everyone whose heart so moves him shall bring. Gifts to Adonai, and the key repeating phrase is, in verse 5, I'll read it for you, don't worry about it. Truma, it's Truma, not Tzedakah. And it says, Kol Nediv Libo shall bring this Truma for Adonai, everybody whose hearts are moved. And what does the Abravanel tell us? What does that mean? Who's up? Mike. Kol Nediv Libo.
There was no intermediary. Everyone whose heart was moved brought terumah direct to Yahweh.
Right, or to Adonai, right? So there's nobody in between. There's no intermediate, there's no priest, no Kohen at this point saying, listen, I'll take it from here. I'm gonna lead your goat to the everybody's gifts sort of were a direct contribution, right? This nonprofit used 100%, right? So that's a big deal. And Simcha of Kelm, Hasidic rabbi, late 19th century, adds, right? Kechu meidchem, take from yourselves, it says. Please. Mike, one more.
Those who bring to help build the Mishkan must take from within themselves. Whatever they're offering, they are bringing themselves.
Yeah, so Kechu meidchem. Like with a sacrifice, a korban, you are taking it of yourself. So somehow the Mishkan, right, is of the people, by the people, because you're bringing a part of the people yourself.
So when Moses
was up and that the first time, the people were saying, where is this guy, you know, he's supposed to connect us with God. and
Yeah.
Lead us in, and maybe this is an effort for God to say, we have a direct relationship here too, don't
Yeah.
just count on Moses.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Yeah, yeah, so. You know, remember that the response of Israel to the revelation, which is, hey, listen, we're going back. You can take it. We don't want to listen to this guy, right? Or this person, this being, right? It's too much for us. You do it. You be our intermediary. Here, it's a direct bringing, right? And the question is, of course, who is it? All whose hearts so move them. Philip, did you still have your hand up? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just a quick question. Could you draw the distinction a little more directly, the difference between terumah and tzedakah? You mentioned it in passing.
Yeah. And this is, I'm quoting Cliff Shapiro here from a bar mitzvah drash 20, how many years ago, Steve?
Longer than I could think.
Right. A lot of years ago, Cliff Shapiro gave a great drash. Tzedakah, he taught, is the obligatory offering that everybody must bring. Terumah is when your heart inspires you to give. It is, right? So the only commandment is be inspired. And if you're inspired, if you're uplifted, if your heart is somehow stirred, you should give. That's what it takes to build a Mishkan, as opposed to. So that's beautiful. John Borden.
These comments make remind me that when they were building when they wanted the golden calf, they actually brought the offering or whatever, it was almost like a payment to Aaron and said, make it. It was almost like a contract. Whereas this is more, to your conception, a covenant. This is people bringing it with no intermediary and bringing it. It's not a payment. It's a gift.
It's an instruction manual. I mean,
Instruction manual, it's very, as Ellis said, it's very detailed, right? So why is it so detailed? There's all kinds of reasons, and not the focus, but important to know. Look at the Ramban on verse 10. The Ramban on verse 10. Well, just give us that Ramban. You see, Moses had to tell.
Ramban, Moses had to tell the entire community all the details that God instructed to let them know that there was a lot of work to be done and many gifts were needed.
So the more detail, the more possibility that somebody could say, hey, you know what? Those tent pegs, I can make those. That's that. What does that take after all? But here's the thing, Chachmat Lev, right? As was noted, right? And it says it again and again. I'm going to go to verse 21, where it says, "Vayetzu kol hadar bnei Yisrael," and the whole Israelite community, the whole thing left from the presence of Moses. Vayavo kol ish asher nesa'u libo, everyone whose heart, lifted them. Kol asher nedavaru rucho, everybody whose spirit moved them came, bringing truma for Adonai in contribution to the work of the sanctuary. So the implication here is that lots and lots of people, or everyone, participated in this effort, because somehow everybody's hearts were moved. Look at the Ramban on 2021. How did these people know how to do this stuff? Was it only, in fact, right? We brought and then we gave it to the Copper Guild, and so the Copper Guild, those guys know how to make the posts. It's up to them. They'll do it. Don't touch anything else. After all, they're the profession. Look at the Ramban under that. Simon, Kol Asher Nisa'o Libo.
Literally, all whose hearts stirred him up. Yet it certainly refers to the artisans, for we never find the idiom of the heart lifting in connection with bringing of customary contributions. We are told that the artisans' hearts moved them towards the work of the tabernacle, but not one of them learned their skill from a teacher. Rather, each found he simply knew how to do so, for his mind was lifting up to Yod-Heh-Vot-Heh.
Right, his mind was lifted in the way of Adonai. So what is this implying? All these artisans, and maybe there were lots of them, they weren't in any guild. They just figured out how to do it, or they knew how to do it, surprising even themselves, perhaps. Right, Jane?
I have a question about that. When they were slaves in Egypt and building the pyramids and tombs and everything like that, didn't they learn how to do some of these things?
Could be, it could be that they would use those skills. The rabbis would have you believe that, that all those people whose hearts so moved them, largely were inspired, right? It was like an inspired art, craft. Maybe they were in, when they were doing the pyramids, the pyramids had big rooms inside, so they had to learn how to, create these furnishings. Maybe, could be, which would be a nice, little turn, a twist in the ironic tale.
Well, it may just have been skills that they may have had professional training that could be applied in a completely novel way that suddenly was inspired, and it's pretty easy to draw parallels to today in that regard.
Right, so could have, or they could be divinely endowed, as the rabbis would like us to believe. So I just throw it out there. So, golden calf, yeah, Pirkei, how am I doing at time? Oh, I'm good. So Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, because it says, as Lloyd pointed out, the half shekel, men 20 and up, fighting force. Here, as it says, in verse 29, Kol ish v'isha asher nadav libam. Every man and woman whose heart so moved them brought. Why is that important? Well, take a look. On the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, when the golden calf, who's up there?
When the golden calf was created, the men divested themselves of their gold, contributing willingly, unlike the women who refused until forced to give. In the construction of the Mishkan, the women bring their finest ornaments, motivated by their need to atone. The men follow suit.
Right. So the women, according to the rabbis, not typical, by the way, are given a lead role here. They are the role model. They are the role model.
While the men are going off to war.
Well, while the men are going off to war, or while the men are building a golden calf. All depends. So then we get to the people of Israel bringing, and what is it about this bringing that makes a Mishkan? Because as Philip asked, and beautifully I think understood, so this is not tzedakah. This is not you gotta bring tzedakah. If you're a kid in religious school in Kesher, do we still collect tzedakah? I don't even know. You know what? I don't teach religious school, so I don't know. I'm hoping we do. But when I was a little kid and I had to make sure I had a quarter to give to, we called it Keren Ami. Very important. That's an obligation. Building the Mishkan, making the Mishkan is not an obligation. It's all about the heart. So look at the Alshech in verse 29. Parents. Heviu b'nei Yisrael.
Though one may have thought the credit due to donors varied according to size, or how promptly the donations came forward, or who brought first, the Torah is at pains to point out the entire people Israel brought. Seeing that what motivated them was Nadav Libam, the free will gift of heart, true generosity, not the desire to impress, they are all given equal credit as we learn in the Talmud. Regardless of its size, small or large, the determining factor in evaluating an offering is the intention with which it is brought.
Right, so it's a beautiful sentiment, but it's true to form, right? It's not about quantity, right? It's much more quality, and even beyond that, it's about intention. So it's about intentionality. This is not begrudging obligation. What does it take to make a community, after all? What does it take to make this Mishkan? People who want to be part of it, right? So it's about desire, and maybe even more, Yeah, Steve.
This recalls when when the temple decided to renovate upstairs.
Yeah.
It became a total group effort, meaning people joined committees, it was an entire, like, how are we gonna do this?
Yeah.
It was really bringing everybody together.
Yeah. The temple's about to announce, its new development plan that's gonna change the physical structure and all this stuff, and I don't know when they're gonna announce it, but they better announce it soon. Maybe they're gonna announce it, at that shindig on the 18th of April, I don't know. But,
Who's that for?
right, but I'll take.
Maybe you just announced it, Rabbi.
Oh, as I said, the temple's about to announce it, but let me tell you so they did that a lot of, and they done it the right way, they've done a lot of work and development, and had a big development team and a development company, whatever it's called, and some initials. And the company was working with, leadership and a whole, a committee that's working on this, putting it together, I think, in a thoughtful way. And they gave some formula of how many people give what and all that stuff. And one of the members of the executive committee said, our goal is 100% contribution. If everybody wants to give $18, that's fine. Or right. So that individual, she understood the goal is right. Of course, everybody wants to give $1 million, please. But we want to value every single. We want to embrace, and that's what makes a community, and that's what makes the Mishkan, right?
So I'm talking out of school right now, but my friend sits on the board of Broad of Shalom, and they're going through this major renovation. So he said to me, "You're not gonna believe this." I said, "What?" He said, "They have a census of everybody in the temple, and they know who's gonna be giving what before they even go."
God bless him.
And
God
I
bless
said,
him.
"God bless." I said, "Does that bring everybody together?" He says, "Not even close."
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
And he was like laughing. He goes,
Yeah, it does. Mike.
It's interesting because there's a lot of resentment, I think, in some of these fundraising galas for various Jewish organizations. When the people say, $1 million, $2 million, and other people say, why should they be so public? Let people pay.
Yeah.
And I think if we did it quietly and confidentially, without everybody knowing who's giving what, we build more of a community.
Yeah, the first time I ever went to, and I believe me, I'm a very strong supporter of UJ Federation. I was sitting on the table with Eugene Grant. Eugene Grant was one of the largest benefactors, one of the most generous human beings. Eugene's a member of the temple. He passed away. May his memory was a blessing. And he stood up. I don't remember what he said. He may have said $500,000. I don't know what he said. And I thought, he's going to give $500,000. I said, oh my God. So I was sort of daunted by it and thought, okay, so the goal is so other people feel badly in giving 100,000, or what's the motivation here? Card calling, as they call it, right? So it was a little challenging for me, even though the cause was righteous, right? Lloyd, then Mike, and then Philip, and then we're going to go back.
Britain's possibility of the notion of kahal.
Yeah.
Can be a neutral term, and it also ties into the multi-tiered type donation for gatherings. Get to the end of the book of Deuteronomy, you end up using the word hakel, shim. In other words,
hakel.
Gather everyone together, men, women, children. You'll become close to God. You'll end up hearing God's law. That's essentially the general admission one. You then go, same chapter, a few verses later, gather unto me the elders of your tribes, your policemen. Let me speak to them. Because I know that after I die, you will sin. Really? So this whole message of hakel, I mean, we want to congratulate ourselves on the public effort.
Yes, and the idea, if you just took kahal, the root, which is a crowd, it's a gathering.
Yes.
Right? So I'm not saying it's a gathering of thugs, right? But it all depends, what is the intent and the purpose of that gathering? If you infuse it with the yud and a hey, the implication is, as is quoted in the Talmud, the kihila is a term. The implication, right? Doesn't always pan out, but it's the implication, right? Who was next? I forget. Somebody else? No.
Mike and Phil.
Oh, but Seth, we're gonna let me go Seth real quick, and then we're gonna go to Mike.
I have a question of the Hebrew.
Yeah.
And verse 22.
Yeah.
Although a lot of the others are clearly men and women. Verse 22 it says Vayavo ha'anoshim al ha'anoshim. What does that mean? The men on the women? The men.
Yeah, that would be a little lewd. I think it's I think it's that the men and even more so the women. I think it's even more so right, Al-Kama V'Chama, yeah, so it's the increase, it's men and even women came. I think that's the implication. Mike.
I mean, I was just gonna say, I love the focus on intention, but just noting that, donating is complicated because the intention may be genuine, but we also want to be recognized.
Yep.
It's like you leave a great tip in a restaurant, do you sort of wait around, make sure the server.
Right.
I mean, so it's not easy. So
Yeah.
there's a kind of I don't know, a little bit of a performative element to it. And that's why when people make anonymous donations, to me, that's kind of extraordinary.
Rambam says almost the highest level of tzedakah. But you'll notice something missing from Larchmont Temple in most places. You know what they are?
Plaques on the wall.
Plaques.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have them. You know why we don't have them? Doesn't matter. Philip.
I was having a little bit of tension about Ibn Ezra's comment, which says it was like the second comment on our page of comments here. The whole community was responsible for paying a ransom to the service of the tabernacle, and we're talking about this in terms of gifts of the heart. Is there a tension there? Is there something I'm missing?
Ransom.
Oh, the idea of ransom? That's it. But the ransom is just supposed to equate to kofar. It's just another way to say everybody brings an equal offering for the for Kitisa, the census or the military census. Here it's much different. Here we're creating a mishkan. So the bringing can be whatever you bring. They don't have to all be the same, but it means even more. I'm sorry that I gotta go to the text. I'm not gonna have enough time. I apologize. So do we need this? Thus they brought the last comment, which is Or Yesharim, another Moed Hasidic commentary. The note is, what were they bringing? They're bringing the heart. Whatever they bring the heart. That's why the end of chapter or the beginning of chapter 36 is so problematic and was the focus of my senior sermon. Why? Because what does Moses say, as was noted, right? First of all, to know that you're bringing, think about any, building campaign and you get more than is needed. And you have to say, folks, don't give me any more, right? We got the 20 million, we're good. Stop. First of all, I'd love to see a congregation do that, right? But what does it mean? There's a key word that's used at the end. Moses has this proclamation. Ish be'ishal lo al yasu od malacha litrumat hakodesh. Men and women do not bring any more gifts for the making of the sanctuary, for this holy truma. And then the key words, vayikale ha'am mehavi. So the people stop bringing. But the word kale, the root of that word stopped, right? The word of that stop is not a customary word. It wouldn't be the word. So what does Rashi say? Rashi doesn't miss anything. Rashi says, who's reading? Who's my reader? Yeah. Vayikale ha'am mehavi, the Rashi.
The people were held back from bringing more. This is the language of restraint.
So somehow, this word, if you want to say prison, what's it called? Beit Kele. A house of restraint. And they were restrained from bringing.
I think in case of the blasphemer or the guy who gathers wood, the language that gets used is vayikale.
Yeah.
And they threw him in the brink.
And they threw him in the brink. There you go. So this is something about they felt restrained or imprisoned almost. They felt like, oh my God, we're being held back. And I think this is our green. I don't even know who this is. It's green. I found the comment. I had it. Gary, give it that as well. Overwhelming.
Overwhelming generosity was needed to make the Mishkan an act of giving that did not place limits, like God's original act of overflowing, creation itself. Every Mishkan, God dwelling we make in our lives requires such generosity.
If we want to make a space for God to dwell, it has to be overflowing generosity of heart. That's what it takes to build it. So I would say maybe Moses made a mistake. I'll tell you why in a little bit.
So, Rashi, I mean, Green, Rashi says something related to the people having to be restrained.
Either the people had to be restrained, or they felt from this proclamation that they were being restrained.
So, I guess either fast forward or go backward, Nadav and Abihu.
Yeah,
So,
I wish somebody restrained them.
well, I guess we gotta, those who came after them, perhaps more, are restrained.
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah, yeah,
Is there any language there related to,
not Bakole, no.
other than the word form?
Eish Sarah, no, I mean, they brought, but there's nothing that connects it to this moment. But in this sense, though, think about this. The people, it clearly, Rashi would say, the people desired to bring more, and they were stopped from it. So how do you channel the efforts of all who want to give all kinds of offerings in order to make that Mishkan? And we're gonna get the word Mishkan in a minute. We've got to go to Rachel Barenblatt, then we'll comment before we do the sermon, right? Because he's good in this one, I'll tell you right now. Go ahead, Shepherds, you guys can put this up, and then we'll go online and have a few people online.
As a contemporary feminist reader of this text, I find much to savor in this passage. Here, women's contributions are valued and honored alongside the contributions of men. And notably, women contribute in at least two different ways. Both women and men make elevation offerings of gold to God, and women are specifically commended for their skilled weaving work. In other words, women contribute to the building of the Mishkan, both on a physical level and on a creative level. They give physical items of value, as well as the spiritually valuable work of their hands and hearts. People bring every kind of beautiful thing they had. Cloth and leather, polished wood and precious stones. On a metaphorical level, I imagine, people bring every kind of temperament and creative skill to the process. Those who are even-keeled bring their serenity. Those who are hot-headed bring their fire. Woodworkers and weavers, careful introverts and spontaneous extroverts, bring what they have and who they are to this work. Work which, the text notes, is fueled by the entire community, each person giving as she or he feels called. In this week's part of our story, the Israelites take every opportunity to be generous, and that generosity transforms them. The craftsman Bezalel and Oliab, and every skilled person whom God had endowed with skill, undertake the project of building a suitable home for God's presence. They take from Moses all of the gifts the Israelites brought in order to fashion them into the Mishkan.
Right, so they're taking them all, they're making a Mishkan, and I love, Rachel Barenblatt is a great poet. She is the Velveteen Rabbi, by the way, that's her, her pseudonym. And she's telling us they all bring something and nothing is refused, right? Yeah, you're a little bit fiery, good, you bring your smelting ability. You're a little bit, so whatever it is, that's okay, we want it. But then, right, as we read, Carol, go ahead, finish that.
You want me to do the blue part?
Yeah.
But when these continued to bring freewill offerings to him morning after morning, all the artisans who were engaged in the tasks of the sanctuary came, each from the task upon which he was engaged, and said to Moses, "The people are bringing more than is needed for the tasks entailed in the work that the Lord has commanded to be done." Moses thereupon had this proclamation made through the camp: "Let no man or woman make further effort toward gifts for the sanctuary." So the people stopped bringing. Their efforts had been more than enough for all the tasks to be done. The community has become so swept up in the experience of being generous, of donating both items of value and the gift of heart and spirit that accompanies those items, that their generosity overwhelms the artisans. They give too much. Moses has to remind them to stop. A boundary is needed to balance the community's overflowing loving kindness and willingness to give. How can this speak to us today, so many centuries removed from the construction of the Mishkan? Maybe in this way, it can exhort us to give freely of ourselves, our gifts, and our talents in the communal work of creating sacred space where the presence of God can dwell. And can also remind us that once we've built that space for God, it's also our job to pull back and to turn our generosity in other directions, to make God's presence manifest through building homes for the needy, weaving garments for those who are cold, and adorning our world with all the beauty we're capable of creating. This is how we can build a Mishkan, a home for the Shekhinah, indwelling and imminent presence of God in our midst. Wherever we are in our journeys toward liberation, may God travel with us and among us, and may we be able to give freely of ourselves both to God and to one another in our wanderings.
So to me, there's a juxtaposition between this and Shabbat.
Okay.
Meaning that it's like you're inviting a lot of guests for dinner and everybody shows up with the same chicken casserole.
Yeah.
So not a good idea. What I'm saying is that you could get carried away and how many, so it's a juxtaposition.
Yeah, I don't think that's
It's
wrong.
channeling.
Yeah, huh.
So following up on what Green said and building upon what Carol read about the Velveteen Rabbit, for me, what struck me session is when Green talks about how a lot that we make in our lives requires a generosity of spirit. So having a son with significant needs, what I have found that is most of a blessing for him, and then that I then can build and feel comfort, is when people approach him with a generosity of spirit.
Mhm.
And it's lovely to see, and it's amazing how infrequent it happens.
Yeah.
And so it's not a big, it's not a great leap to also show that in addition to weaving and building and cooking, it's just sharing the generosity of spirit with someone at that moment.
Yeah.
You build a divine, holy, warm, intimate connection.
Yeah.
That's
a place where God can dwell, right? That's a right. And I'm gonna get to a root word in a minute. Gary.
So it reminds me of a Hindu thing of not killing cows. And I think the theory is the cows, we can create a lot more food today. If we keep the cow, they can create milk and power in the future. So sort of an interplay with, there's too much in the future. We've got to save, but too much for the present. We've got to
save it for the future. Okay, all right, look.
We're coming up, tomorrow we're ready to the month of 2nd of August.
It is.
And once you get into this season of Haftarot, the prophetic readings that are attached become special readings. And one of the first out of the box is the Haftarah from 2 Kings on the construction of the temple. And let's fast forward. And circumstances are very different there than they are described here. By that time already, nothing is happening within the temple. It has fallen into disrepair. The king is ticked. He instructs, he basically said, how did this happen? And essentially, either the people stopped giving or the priest basically said, there were better causes than the young people. And then as the story progresses, everyone brings, it seems to be though far more regulated, but they talk about in the end, the people aren't the ones who do the repair work. What they do instead is they use the money that they get to pay skilled artisans. There's a detachment.
It's hired hands.
Hired hands.
Yeah.
And whereas over here, you have all this beautiful jewelry that's being donated, the reading concludes by stating, no, it's only used for the repair.
Right.
It's not used for anything that looks cool or beautiful.
Which makes the Mishkan so unique.
Yes.
The Mishkan is unique. Why is the Mishkan unique? Let me give you a root, and then we're gonna read the sermon, right? And maybe online, maybe, I don't know, Carol, Shayna, Jared, you guys can split the sermon. So here's the word for Mishkan. Here's Mishkan, right? Right, just 4 letters. So here's Mishkan, which means the sacred place where God dwells. You could call it a tabernacle. Here is from the same root, right? Because the root here is shachen. This is the root, shachen, or shachan, right? The same root you get Shekhinah. What is Shekhinah? It's the divine indwelling, God's presence dwelling in the world. But all you have to do is change one vowel, and you get the word for Shekhinah, which is neighborhood. Which is why what Harley said is so, I think, prolific, and what was said is so important. What are we building? What are we building? We are building a place where God can dwell. Not, right, when I ask kids, where do you come to pray? Where do you come to be close to God? They don't, and when they say the sanctuary, I say, baloney. I said, really? You got, every time you're gonna be close to God, you're gonna come to the sanctuary? I said, that'd be awful. I said, where do you go? Then they say, well, I go to my room. So I said, all right. I said, you ever hang out with your friends to be close to God? You ever go to Nikki's Pizza to be close to God? Do you ever take a walk in the park to be close to God with 5 people? Do you ever just, get together like on a Saturday night and like just have fun? I said, maybe that's being close to God.
And then playing it back to what's recorded in Second Kings, that's not referring to the Mishkan. It's referring to the Mikdash. And holiness isn't just being, I'll be really good. Part of holiness is also separation. And once you have separation, you know what? That's for the other guy. I want out. Whereas in Mishkan,
right, so no, which is such a crucial distinction. It didn't say in these chapters, make me a mikdash, even though that's what God said in chapter 25 in the book. It says, make me a mishkan and I will dwell. So it's all about creating this sacred space. Go to the serpent. Who did I say? I forget. Shayna, Carol Sharf. Who wants to start? Carol, can you start, Carol? And then Shayna, and then maybe Jared, and we can take the last paragraph?
Can you take the last paragraph?
I'll take the last paragraph. Never mind, Jared. I just cut you out of the mix. I can't believe she made me do it.
Not long after quitting time, when everyone else had already headed home, as Moses was making his twilight rounds of the tabernacle construction, pleased as could be with Bezalel and all the skilled craftspeople's artistry, he heard a faint sound coming from the far corner, the copperworks tent to be exact. Peering through the tent flap, expecting a foreman perhaps, he spied a young boy, maybe 12 or so, leaning over a bench, feverishly polishing away. Hey there, Boychik, what do you think you're doing? Can't you see everyone else is already back at camp? Yes, sir. I mean, Moses, sir. Well, I was just, what's so important after all that you can't continue it in the morning? Well, nothing really, but, well, I just finished these today and I couldn't leave without making them shine. As the young man held out his creation, Moses held it closer to take a look. Well, now, these are the shiniest copper tent pegs I've ever seen. But son, don't you know where these are going? They're for the outer courtyard tent flaps. We're just going to stick them in the ground. And with a knowing nod, his heart brimming with pride, the 12-year-old reminded Moses, but if they're part of making the Mishkan, first, shouldn't I make sure that they shine? So Rab Mordecai Yosef of
Go with Shayna, and then I'll read the rest. Is Shayna,
Okay.
you around? By the way, I love that. This is that sermon that I wrote, Rosh Hashanah, maybe, no, it wasn't Rosh Hashanah. It must have been this portion back in 2004. Okay.
So Rabbi Mordecai Yosef and Izbika taught, Vayahi,
HaMishkan Echad.
thank you, the Mishkan was one. For in building it, all Israel were joined heart to heart. For even though at first each skilled artisan felt that his work was superior, when they all saw how the individual pieces fit together, realizing how greatly each one of them relied upon the other, they perceived Echad, as if a single person had made it all. And as a result, our Mordecai Yosef explained, the one who made the Holy Ark itself felt no greater accomplishment, no greater pride than the one who'd only made the courtyard tent pegs, and making the Mishkan every person's contribution shines. Of all weeks to make his untimely exit from this earth, Fred Rogers leaves us this week, not coincidentally, but in a Bashirt sort of way, covenantally holding on to his building code, which is, in essence, the Torah portion before our eyes. For Mr. Rogers was making a Mishkan, indeed, as he invited millions of children into his neighborhood to create a community of kindness, to treat one another like neighbors, So we can't help but note the root word for Mishkan, the sanctuary of God's dwelling. If, please won't you be my shachen, neighbor, for that's where the building begins, as Mr. Rogers enabled our children to find refuge from the harsh reality of military buildups and terror alerts by creating a fantasy land where trust and compassion are real. He was constructing a Mishkan. Indeed, as this cardigan-clad ordained Presbyterian minister, parodied and goody two-shoes as they come, brought a message profoundly simple. It was nonetheless profound, for the secret to making a Mishkan is believing that we can.
So with hearts moved to dream beyond the madness to a world where every contribution makes a difference and every person counts, caring as best we can for our little corner, caring for our neighbors like part of our family, may our construction of a place where holiness can dwell never cease. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
It's no like great, oh my God, what's the message? The message is the Mishkan is not complete. Yeah. We're still building it. My senior sermon at HUC, which I started, I must have told you this. I had the wise idea to start it by being in the congregation. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do this since, because maybe it was a bad idea. And I memorized the first page and a half of my sermon because I was Moses. Because and I started, I got up and I started shaking people's hands. Wonderful job. Thank you so much. What a great, you were so essential in building this, right? And then I get up to the podium and I say, just want to let everybody know, achieved our goal. It's all complete. We've got everything we need. All of you people, leave it to the professionals. We'll take care of it from here on in. You can all go home. Right? That's what Moses did. So Moses said, we don't need any more. We're just going to have the hired hands or the big guns and he cut off the people's spirit. That was restraint. He said, if the artisans say we have everything we need, we must have everything we need. But that wasn't what it took to make the Mishkan. It was hearts moving. It was the people whose hearts were open to the process who did, some of them were going to care about the Mishkan, a lot of them weren't. What they cared about was doing it together and the giving. So when I reach out to somebody whose heart's a little bit down or a little bit closed or spirit is, shaken, and I can lift them up, that is a free will offering of the heart. That's the goal. Is this hard? No. This is our holy work that keeps going again and again and again every day. And I love what the Velveteen Rabbi said. And I wish I had a good handle. What would I be? The Boston Rebbe? I don't think so. Right? So what she said, which is so wonderful, right? Those who are even keeled bring serenity, hot-headed bring fire. So think of it. Everybody's different, but they each bring something. There's nobody whose offering is not important. Nobody. Right? So what do you got? What's the takeaway for here? Right? How are we building the Mishkan today? And where is the Mishkan?
It's kind of the whole world of people.
Yeah.
Who bringing what's best of themselves.
Yes. Yeah. Bringing the best of you to the world around you. Yeah, Steve.
I think the challenge for us today goes beyond, I get together with people on a social basis, and what goes on in the Middle East today is so hard.
Yeah.
To try to get everybody to agree that we all disagree. That's even the hardest part, is that just to get everybody to say that, okay, we all disagree.
Yeah.
And how can we make this better?
Yeah.
And I find it really challenging to even have that conversation. It's that, you talk about trying to do it on a local level. Imagine trying to just have some people over and talk about it.
6:45 this morning, I was getting my coffee at Sunshine. I came out and there's a guy running by and he stops. He had a filled up, and he said, how about what are we gonna do this year? And all of a sudden I realized who he was, and I don't remember his name. He's not a member of Temple or any congregation that's Jewish. But I said, the Sox didn't invest, blah, blah, blah. And then he says, how are you doing? I said, I'm doing okay. I said, you mean Israel? He said, yeah, very tough. I said, yeah. I said, you know, I said, I want justice. I want Israel's security. And I'd like there to be a place where Palestinians can live in peace and dignity. I said, I don't like to see innocent people killed. He said, yeah, I'd just like to see a ceasefire now. And I said, well, I disagree with you.
Yeah, right.
I said, but, I'd like to see everyone figure out a way to live in the same neighborhood. And I wasn't knowing I was quoting, right? And he said, you know, I hear you. He said, we should talk about this more. And then we said something else and he ran away. And I thought, he didn't tell me I was wrong. I didn't exactly tell him he was wrong, but we were able to have a conversation.
Right.
And we were able to say,
That's what I mean. But we're all coming from a point. What was it yesterday, International Women's Day?
yeah,
And nobody makes mention about Jews. Nobody makes mention what happened in Israel. It's like it didn't exist.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just beyond comprehension, and it's incredibly.
Listen, living in a neighborhood is knowing that your neighbors, whatever your neighbors' needs are, they matter too. So I agree. So we live in a very small neighborhood. We, you know, one of the things this portion teaches us is that that you can't save the world. But if you save one little corner of it, right? You know, if I go over to Seth Street and do something nice, right? So we work together to create, right? Maybe we are saving the world.
Follow the moms. Because the moms will lead the way. The women have led the way, and that's the illusion I take away from this portion. And in Israel right now, it was the women who had organized the protests, you know, centers in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem, and immediately on October 8th turned them into volunteer centers that were overflow. The Miluim, you know, had over the reservists being called up, had every unit had over 100% people show up. So that's the abundance of heart.
Right.
And meanwhile, every mother that's at home has started, I mean, some have started schools where they're necessary because the prescribed infrastructure has failed, but the people have showed up and the women have taken the lead and go to combat and are, some of them, protesting the government, and other mothers down in Gaza right now trying to deliver meals on foot across the border. I mean, think about that for a second.
Yeah.
So in every direction, everybody is bringing their own.
Yeah,
version.
the hard part to remember for us is, you know, that our neighborhood, right, is in a tough neighborhood if you're talking about the people of Israel, but Gaza is part of our neighborhood. And so we have to figure out a way to treat people who are maybe very different from us, or maybe not so different, like they are a shachen, a neighbor. It doesn't happen easily, and it doesn't happen in a moment. But we have a lot of work to do. It starts right here. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for coming. Next
Thank
week,
you,
we have a
Rabbi.
great follow-up push.
Thank you,
miss.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Shane. I couldn't ask anybody better. You and Carol were perfect reading sermons.
Beautiful soul, beautiful.
Thank you. They are. They're the best.
I'm getting my game.
Thank you, guys. I should end this because they get yelled at me if I don't end.